Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Toast. And I hope everybody's ready for the weekend because, there's a lot of things happening. Not only did Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart just release, which, looks amazing. Definitely going to be playing that later on today. But then we also have E3 2021. E3 does kick off tomorrow, starting off with Ubisoft Forward, and then on Sunday you have Xbox as well as Square Enix and so much more. So definitely exciting stuff with all that. Cannot wait. But actually about E3, potentially a massive leak just surfaced online. And when I say massive, I mean we're talking about 58 total games from E3 potentially leaked online from an insider that has a 100% accurate track record. Yeah, so there is reason to believe this leak, though don't worry, I'm not going to talk about all 58 of those games today. Because we're so close to E3, we're really starting to get into that spoiler territory, so I thought I would just talk about two games that we've already talked about in the past on this channel. As for the other 56 games, if you really want to see those, I will leave a link in the description below. But with that said, let's just go ahead and get right into the news, starting off with an interesting Xbox Series S peripheral device. Yeah, so do you remember that old PlayStation 1 LCD screen that you could attach to the console? Yeah, well, apparently somebody's actually making something like that for the Xbox Series S. Yeah, so check this out. This device goes by the name of X Screen and will have a 1080p IPS screen with 60 Hz refresh rate. It will also have an integrated 5-watt speaker included, and I actually think this is pretty interesting. Now, as of this moment, this device is only a prototype, and it actually has to go through a Kickstarter later this summer, but this actually does make the Xbox Series S an enticing portable-like console. I mean, it's not completely portable because you still have to plug it in and everything. I'm not going to just put this thing on my lap and play it wherever I want, but at the same time, if you move around a lot, you could simply just carry this along with you and plug it in where you can. I think it's an interesting concept, and I always liked that they did that with the PlayStation 1, so, seeing it with the Xbox Series S, yeah, I do like this personally. I mean, you could have the Xbox Series S as a secondary console with a portable screen and just carry it to location. I think it's a cool idea, but let me know in the comments below on whether you like the idea of the X Screen or not. Would you try something like this, and how much would you be willing to spend? I mean, you do have to consider that we don't have a price for this thing just yet, so how much would you be willing to spend for the X Screen? Next up, let's talk about a game that just released today, and no, I'm not talking about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, but instead, we're actually talking about yet another PlayStation console exclusive, Guilty Gear Strive. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure about the release date for this one, and it probably will go under the radar, considering it did launch side by side with not only Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, but also Final Fantasy VII Integrate. I really don't like that all three of these big PlayStation games launched within like a 2-day period. Probably not the smartest decision in the world, but the good news is that Guilty Gear Strive looks to be yet another high-quality fighting experience in the Guilty Gear franchise. It has an 88 overall score on Metacritic, which actually makes this, I believe, the highest rated game in the entire franchise. Now, these games have always quietly been among the best fighting games in the industry, period. So to see it review even better than past entries is just absolutely fantastic. It looks like if you are a fan of the franchise or fighting games in general, then Guilty Gear Strive will be a great entry point for the PlayStation 5. I mean, this is probably the first premier fighting game to release for next generation consoles, and it looks to be a great one. Now, Guilty Gear is one of those franchises that can be a little intimidating because, yes, it does have complex fighting mechanics, but from what I've been hearing, Guilty Gear Strive is a great entry point for newcomers as well. So whether you're a newcomer to Guilty Gear or if you're a longtime veteran, Guilty Gear Strive just looks to be a great game. Now, we also need to talk about the Nintendo Switch because a surprise game that's been rumored for the Switch for quite a while now has officially been confirmed to be coming to the Switch, and that's Kingdom Come: Deliverance. Now, this is a really interesting port for multiple reasons. First off, I think this is a great game and a very welcome addition to the Switch library. This is kind of a unique Western RPG because it's kind of got more of a focus on a realistic setting rather than your typical fantasy setting that you see in games like this. And just overall, it has a good story, and it's just an overall unique and fun game. So from that standpoint, this is an excellent game to bring over to the Switch. But at the same time, this is also a big AAA game, and that's where things get really interesting. I mean, this is a big Western RPG that can be, yes, graphically demanding, and it will be interesting to see how this game performs and looks on the Switch. Now, we have seen games get ported to the Switch in the past and do a great job with this. I mean, we've seen that with games like Doom Eternal and most notably The Witcher 3. And while both of those were downgraded to run on the Switch, they still turned out to be great Switch ports, and hopefully we see something similar here with Kingdom Come Deliverance. And just based off of other games that have been ported to the Switch, I do absolutely think that Kingdom Come Deliverance can do the same. And this is a great game to bring to the Switch. Again, like I said, it is a good game. It's very unique. It's got a good story, and its gameplay is fun. So bringing this to the Switch, I think fans will definitely be happy with that. Now, I don't expect it to look like the prettiest game in the world, but just having a portable version of a game like this, I think is great on its own. Let's talk about that big E3 leak, though, and this one really is massive. I mean, we're talking about 58 total games that leaked online from a very accurate and credible insider by the name of Practical Brush 12 over on Reddit. Now, usually I don't talk about Reddit leaks, but in this case, this is a special situation because in the past, Practical Brush 12 has been 100% accurate. They've leaked out Pokemon games. They've leaked out complete Nintendo Directs. They've leaked out Monster Hunter Rise and Cuphead, DLC, and Smash Brothers characters, and every single one of those leaks have been 100% accurate. So in this case, Practical Brush 12 does have a very good track record, which is why so many people are taking notice to this leak. And not only that, but Daniel Ahmad, which is a well-respected insider, is also kind of signing off onto this tweet over on Twitter. So this leak does seem to have some legitimacy to it, though with any leak, and I always say this, but you need to take it with a grain of salt. For that matter, Practical Brush's original post is kind of passing this off as a prediction post, but then right after says, I guess it's spoilers. So, I mean, it probably is spoilers, and again, we're not actually going to talk about all 58 of those games. E3 is only a couple days away, and I don't want to ruin it for everybody, so instead of talking about all 58 games, I will leave a link below in case you do want to check those out, but we will talk about 2 games in specific because we've already talked about these games on the channel multiple times in the past. And the first game would be a new Mario plus Rabbids sequel, which I am all for. Mario plus Rabbids is quietly probably one of the best Mario spin-offs to exist to date. And we have talked about a sequel in the past multiple times because some job listings over at Ubisoft did seem to signify that they could be possibly working on a new Mario plus Rabbids game. So to see a leak like this right ahead of Ubisoft Forward, which is tomorrow, is very interesting. There is a possibility that we could end up seeing Mario plus Rabbids as early as tomorrow, though I think this is kind of a good test to see if this leak is actually true or not. Because if Ubisoft Forward happens tomorrow and we don't see a new Mario plus Rabbids game, then there's a good chance that the rest of this leak is also fake. Now, maybe a new Mario plus Rabbids could appear at Nintendo instead, but looking through this leak, I really only see one Nintendo-related leak, and because of that, it gives me the assumption that this leaker did not have information about the Nintendo Direct. Now, I could be wrong about that, but I will say, if there is a Mario plus Rabbids sequel that gets announced tomorrow, I will definitely be very happy about that. And for that matter, if you all haven't already played Mario plus Rabbids on the Switch, go do yourself a favor and check that game out. It really is excellent. Now, as for this other game that we're going to talk about in this leak, this is actually an Xbox-related title. For that matter, multiple Xbox titles were on this list, but this one we have talked about a few times, and that is The Outer Worlds 2. And this one right here is really exciting because The Outer Worlds is probably one of the best Western RPGs that released last generation for the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. And to see it get a sequel, which will be funded by Xbox this time, and because it will be funded by Microsoft this time, which was confirmed just a few weeks ago, this could be a major jump from the original. The first game was published by Private Divisions as it was in development before Xbox acquired them, and it was a AA style game. But if they really want to, they could make The Outer Worlds 2 into a legitimate AAA franchise, and I could definitely see them doing something like that. The first game was really successful, and it's got all the signs for a big AAA franchise. Now, we'll have to see what all happens with that, but, I don't really think The Outer Worlds 2 being at E3 is all that surprising if it does indeed happen. We've gotten hints from both Xbox and Obsidian in the past that they do want to work on a sequel, and I think they could do a lot with this franchise. So I think this absolutely makes sense, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. If this leak is indeed true, though, there's definitely going to be some big games at that Xbox conference that has me really excited. So I'm just getting more and more excited for E3 this Sunday. Next up, let's talk about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I know a lot of you out there will probably be playing this game this weekend, as this is one of the very first big PlayStation 5 exclusives, and it looks fantastic. I have not gotten to play this game just yet because, I'm here talking with you all, but after this video, I'm going to be playing this game immediately. Very excited for that. But one of the big questions for this game was, how is it going to perform? I mean, when we see trailers of this game online, it looks phenomenal. It immediately drew comparisons to Pixar graphics because it really does look that good. But how does it actually perform on a PS5? And that is very important. Well, Digital Foundry, which, I have a lot of respect for, they do a great job at figuring out the performance of all these different games, had good news for Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. It has 3 different game modes: Quality Mode, Performance, and then Performance Ray Tracing. Now, Quality Mode is pretty straightforward. It's got 4K resolution, 30 frames per second, and ray tracing. If you just care about graphics, then Quality Mode is going to look absolutely stunning, of course, but that will be in sacrifice of frame rate. Now, for me, I'm always going to prefer frame rate over resolution. So, even though Quality Mode looks really pretty, running at 30 frames per second, I feel is a step backwards. But if you prefer that type of style of gameplay, absolutely, you can play in Quality Mode. Now, as for performance, it runs at a dynamic 1800p at 60 frames per second, though there is no ray tracing. But at the same time, you get pretty good resolution, and it's got a buttery smooth frame rate, and really this is the main way a lot of these games have been played for these next generation consoles so far. Most games have not been able to achieve 60 frames per second with ray tracing, and that's actually why this next game mode is just so impressive. So, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart actually offers one more game mode, being Performance Ray Tracing, and this is extremely impressive. So check this out. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart can run at a dynamic 1440p at 60 frames per second with ray tracing. And according to Digital Foundry, this is the absolute best way to play Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Now, I've said it in the past, but I actually believe that more games needs to do this. So far this generation, a lot of people really haven't got to experience ray tracing just yet because, it is incredibly demanding. Not everybody is willing to sacrifice frame rate for ray tracing. And that's what I like with this ray tracing performance mode. We're seeing the best of both worlds. You get good visuals with ray tracing and solid resolution alongside a stable 60 frames per second. I've said this before, but I really do believe more games needs to do this in the future. We've now seen Insomniac Games do that with both of their games being Spider-Man, Miles Morales, and now Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. And I hope with the amount of a positive reaction that this has received, that more developers will start to do this performance ray tracing mode. If anything, I just think more options equals better. But let me know in the comments below, would you rather play in quality, performance, or performance ray tracing? Let me know in the comments below. And before I go, let's go ahead and take a look at the poll of the day, where I asked you all what letter grade would you give the Summer Game Fest kickoff event. And 49% of you gave it a C, while 24% of you gave it a B. So for the most part, you all didn't seem to be blown away by this event, and I do agree with you all here. In yesterday's video, I did say that I would give this event a B- simply because it had Elden Ring. But the more I thought about it, outside of Elden Ring, this event was not all that great. I mean, at one point, I even voiced my frustrations over on Twitter while the event was taking place because it was just taking way too long. And this is something that Jeff Keighley tends to do with all his events. They just seem to be bloated. A lot of the game announcements are not all that exciting. And then you have music, as well as yesterday, you had things like actors come up there and talk about games. And it just becomes a little too much at some point. Now, with that said, I do think that there were still some good games to be announced here, as I talked about in yesterday's video. You had games like Planet of Lana, Death Stranding for the PS5, you had Elden Ring, and there was a few other games. So there was some good games here, but I'm not sure that it warranted an hour and 45-minute event. I feel like Jeff Keighley needs to go back to the drawing board and find a way to shorten these events to possibly around 40 minutes to an hour long. I think that would be a much better time frame, and not only could you show a lot of games in that time frame, but you're also respecting your audience. I just don't think that he has enough big games here to warrant an hour and 45-minute long event, but that's just my opinion. If you feel differently, that's completely fine. I can understand that as well. But I will say this, I think in the future, I'd be more than okay if we just have E3 going forward. It's now been 2 years in a row, and I don't feel like Summer Game Fest has made a statement that it should truly exist. I mean, we still need to see how E3 works out and everything, but yeah, I wasn't overly impressed with Summer Game Fest, and maybe that's just because I don't like Keighley-style events. But I would much rather just have an event filled with games after games after games, rather than having all this extra stuff included. But hey, that's just my opinion. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.